Previously on X-Men.
Ah, forefather, how we have forsaken thee. Let's cut right to the quick. No big studio would ever acknowledge or appreciate and thus invest in the lineage owed to this horror series.
1 year later.
Anybody think we'll ever get another Alone in the Dark game? Unless it's crowdfunded?
3 weeks later.
Folks, you'll indulge me as I pat myself on the back regarding the devotion I have maintained to my channel's original mission statement of holding horror to a higher standard. I've laid out the reasons why Predator 2 is an excellent sequel in my 30-year retrospective. I have taken horror media to task for the shills within our ranks through my coroner's report. I've even held beloved franchises' feet to the fire when they have turned on the fans. However, today, I'm here to give my loving listeners and adoring audience another first. The admittance that I was stone cold dead wrong.
It's a cookbook! It's a cookbook!
Are you telling us absolutely everything?
Not exactly. We're also out of coffee.
Yes, fans, it is with a heavy heart that I bring you these tidings, but all is not lost because, to be frank, and that's all I've ever been with you, I could not be happier over my mistake, due in no small part because of the implications of this revelation.
Lycans and gentlemen!
The rumors were true. Our forefather has returned. Alone in the Dark is back. A sleeping giant slumbers no more, and the hope is that we're all in for a rude awakening, and this icon aims to reclaim its crown. Described as psychological horror meets Southern Gothic, the Alone in the Dark remake sounds like a match made in horror. Therefore, its remembrance represents salvation snatched from the jaws of oblivion, and its resurrection is a cause for celebration. After all, how often are our prayers answered for the deliverance of something so profane? However, after such an overdue get-together, I believe introductions are in order. It's been 30 long years since we've last seen our old friend, so if they're kind enough to invite us back for this reunion, it's only fitting we greet their warm welcome to their swampland abode with Southern hospitality. How's things by you? Before I spill the beans on this jambalaya, what say we take a temperature check with this video's sponsors? Think of the power to tune out the whole world placed in your hands. Now think again, because Jabra Headsets puts that power in your ears. Listen closely. From workout earbuds to Bluetooth music headsets and office hearing devices. So, if other brands play your music sounding like a broken record, march to the beat of a different tune with Jabra. If you're an HD snob like me, you probably buy Samsung for all your major electronics. Catch up on your favorite horror classics on one of their Ultra HD TVs. Watch one of Scream Factory's Blu-rays on their 4K players. Keep up with updates from 80s horror documentary In Search of Darkness on a high-end tablet. Subscribe to your favorite YouTuber through one of their Galaxy phones. I have so many Samsung devices, I've always thought they should be paying me. Well, now they can, and you can help. If you use the link in the description for either Samsung or Jabra purchases, it'll help the channel out tremendously. With the promotional considerations accounted for, it's on with the show. In the decade before the Dead Spaces or your Fatal Frames, in a time before Silent Hills or Amnesia, there was this founding father of survival horror. The official reveal at Gamescom went ahead by publisher THQ Nordic as scheduled, after trigger-happy Belgian retailer Smart Toys jumped the gun on the posting for the game listing.
What a goose!
The game is looking to have some literary horsepower under the hood, with the writing duties taken up by screenwriter Mikhail Hedberg, whose credits include Soma and Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Good news on the latter, meh on the former. You have to understand that if franchises like Dead Space and Alan Wake lost support to the point that those IPs missed entire console cycles, the likelihood of the gaming business recognizing the value of Alone in the Dark that fans maintain, let alone iterating on that series, seemed slimmer than Zendaya prepping for an audition. That prospect is diminished further by the most recent sequels garnering poor critical and commercial praise. On the topic of next gen, which I guess are now current gen consoles, you might say that new home systems are primed for sequels, remakes, and remasters, as evidenced by the recent Alan Wake remaster and the upcoming Dead Space remake, but keep in mind, that ain't no guarantee that our favorite franchises are safe. 8 years later, we still ain't seen a sequel to Alien Isolation, which, despite selling well, the studio was disappointed in sales, switched gears back to the FPS safe bet, then proceeded to double down on an action entry with Alien's Dark Descent, even though the horror title Alien Isolation outsold Alien's Fireteam Elite by over $3 million. That's over 25%. Money well spent. Now then, while it's obvious that a revival would've and should've remained within the same genre, because this isn't an Uwe Boll production adapting the game in name only, I have to still commend developer Pieces Interactive for retaining the original game's time and setting. Believe me, any attempt to modernize this game's time period would have immediately fallen flatter than any film using Natalie Portman as a selling point, or flatter than her acting, or flatter than Natalie Portman. The point is, there's something to be said about timing and location, and if this series is making a comeback, I'm glad they're doing it in style. 1920s time period with a side of Southern Gothic. The backdrop of a classier Depression-era noir scenery mixed with a Creole setting of the New Orleans landscape is my kind of horror. As a tourist, having spent his pre-pandemic Halloween in the Big Easy, La Nouvelle Orleans is tragically underutilized by horror cinema. So, I for one am happy to see it getting some shine in the revival of such an influential franchise that finally gets some Southern fried justice.
Cause this here is main justice. Give it to me.
I will caution weary hardcore fans and horror gamers not to panic over the mention of combat in the game. You will use both firearms and melee weapons to battle monstrous enemies. According to developers, a lot of times you'll be grabbing whatever's close at hand to fight the creatures you face, so there's that survivor's desperation aspect to it of using whatever's available instead of walking into any scenario loaded for bear. Additionally, the designers fully intend on upholding that oldest and noblest of scary game design, which is the necessity of flight when fight simply isn't an option. Anyone still on the fence over the inclusion of combat can take solace and should take into account what the game is aiming for and fully acknowledges. While many a survival horror title places emphasis on the overtly terrifying ingredients of the genre, this remake aspires to explore tone and atmosphere, the core tenets of the original. Fighting may be a part of the game as you fend off nightmarish creatures, but it's not the main thrust of the game. I've said it before, but it bears repeating. I thoroughly enjoy the private investigator gameplay of another survival horror remake, 2018's Call of Cthulhu, so I'm tickled pink with anticipation over how they'll implement detective mechanics into this latest renewal. On that topic, leaning further into Lovecraftian territory than its inspiration, not only does this exemplify what I mean when I speak of remakes of past classics closing the gap of modern gaming conventions, but assures me the confidence that this relaunch is in good hands. Can't be worse than how live action has treated the Lovecraft mythos. Along with preserving both time period and location, another holdover from the original will see players fill the shoes of either series regulars Edward Carnby or Emily Hartwood, investigating the disappearance of Emily's uncle. The one character in the story to have gotten recast is the setting itself. With a return to Derceto Manor, it appears a residence of evil is afoot. No, not you. Instead of a mansion, the venue is a countryside mental health clinic for rich patients. Jeez, I guess inflation's hit everybody hard. Well, at least it's got a nice view. I like a little rustic feel with my wacky farm. Once you pay a house call to the loony bin,
This place has everything.
you're said to encounter strange residents, eldritch horrors, Ezra Miller, the worst of the worst. The Nut House isn't the only venue you'll visit during your sightseeing either. If you look to the right of the tour bus, you'll also delve into an alternate dimension through portals full of eldritch monsters. Remember to grab your souvenirs at the gift shop. TH Nordic is not responsible for your lost or stolen sanity. Much like RE2, the story, the cutscenes, and NPC reactions will vary depending on which character you play as, so you'll have to play the full game twice to get the full picture. Speaking of, it took several years, but it seems that studios are finally learning the lessons of Doom 2016 and the RE2 remake. Believe me, I would sprout enough hardwood to rival a lumberyard if the 9th console cycle represented new scary IP to release alongside classic entries in the genre. But if we're going to resurrect long-dormant survival horror milestones, then count me in. As mentioned in episode 21, Survival Horror Remorse, remakes of scary games have far more to gain than retreads of their cinematic counterparts. Considering that scary movie reboots lend themselves far too much to nostalgia exploitation and corporate greed, whereas, on the gaming front, considering how far gaming mechanics have come since tank controls and fixed camera angles, survival horror remakes allow for much more innovation. If RE2 Remake reopened the doors to the survival horror's past, here's hoping its predecessor delivers on the game that paved the way for the genre's future. I, for one, am thankful that this is one property that they didn't leave well enough alone. I've been Inkarnate, and I ain't just a big deal, I'm the real deal. Now hit him with it, Crawdaddy!
Oh, I want to be in that rumba, and the saints go over there.
If you're resigned to your fate, time to subscribe to your fears.
Come and play with us. Forever and ever.